NFL trade deadline was yesterday, and I have thoughts. Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I am your host, John Delray. That's right, today we are reacting to the NFL trade deadline where the Green Bay Packers did what they normally do at the trade deadline, which is absolutely nothing. I have several thoughts on it about even the involvement of the people who make these decisions, some of the players that got dealt. But before we get to any of that, please hit like, share, subscribe on this video, and let's dive into the Wednesday wellness check. What players today for the Green Bay Packers practiced, which ones didn't, which ones were limited, all could be important for this Sunday's matchup against the Detroit Lions. Now, in terms of who did not practice, keep in mind this is a Wednesday practice. Generally, if guys are going to sit because of bumps, bruises, just needing rehab, it's going to be on the Wednesday. So it's a fairly lengthy did not practice list today. You've got David Bakhtiari, Devondre Campbell, Shamar Jean-Charles, Elgton Jenkins, and Christian Watson. Watson, of course, still in the concussion protocol. Elgton Jenkins, as revealed at LaFleur's yesterday press conference, the injury came from being stepped on last week. I've been toying through in my head like how getting stepped on affects your knee, and I'm not quite there yet, but no reason not to take him for word there. So Elgton Jenkins still rehabbing, obviously hoping he can go on Sunday. Shamar Jean-Charles still out. Devondre Campbell. LaFleur did not sound especially optimistic about Campbell for this weekend, so we're going to have to see what direction that heads. And then David Bakhtiari, probably on his new plan or new and original plan for Bakhtiari of not being able to do 3 days of practice in a row. Now, in terms of the limited practices, Allen Lazard returned to practice today. Obviously a big deal for the offense. LaFleur did sound much more optimistic about Lazard. Aaron Rodgers even practiced today. Traditionally, he hasn't, since this thumb injury has crept up, he hasn't done many Wednesday practices. This is his day off normally to rehab the thumb. But obviously the thumb is doing well enough, or there's a sense of urgency there enough, that Rodgers practiced today. And then the last addition is Preston Smith. This is a new injury. They listed it as like head and shoulders, I think. This sounds like a bumps and bruises type situation. So ultimately, he still got in a limited practice. I wouldn't think that this bears a tremendous amount of bearing on his status for this weekend. So there you have it. Also, last tidbit of injury news, Kylin Hill has been activated, officially placed on the 53-man roster. This, of course, comes after the release of Patrick Taylor just within the last couple of days. Kylin Hill, it remains to be seen if he's just going to walk right back into the kick returning role. We don't even know if he's going to be completely good to go for this weekend yet either. Part of the reason that they must have activated him today is because today was the deadline that they had to activate him, or else he would be on injured reserve for the rest of the season. So what complete state he's in, now obviously he did practice today because he wasn't listed as a DNP, but still, you have to wonder, is he just going to fly right back into the kick returner role? Are they still going to have Keyshawn Nixon, amongst others, do it until they feel more confident in Hill? Is Hill good to go? There's just lots of questions that we don't know yet with Kylin Hill's return. So definitely keep an eye on that as the week progresses. Now, trade deadline. Yeah, the Green Bay Packers did nothing. Would it have been great to see the Packers go out and acquire some talent at receiver, at safety, at defensive tackle? And I don't mean to replace Kenny Clark, but I mean like they added Jerron Reed, they drafted Devontae Wyatt. Kenny still needs help on the defensive line. So would it have been nice to see them trade for something? Yeah, it would have. But my argument will boil down to, and it has always boiled down to, it's become pretty clear this may not be the year to do that. Your future is already heavily mortgaged in terms of cap in the next couple of years. Brandon Cooks is a great example of this. Now, Brandon Cooks obviously very not happy in Houston, especially given the trade yesterday. It's believed that there was some fallout because Houston originally was going to take on some of the money of next year to make it easier to trade him, and then didn't. So Brandon Cooks now, there's all these rumors flying right this minute about whether Houston will release him, anything, because he is quite disgruntled and didn't practice today. But he's a great example of the Packers couldn't just go out and get anyone. Why? Because Brandon Cooks is due $18 million next year. The Packers do not have room to take on an $18 million contract for next year. So whoever they were going to acquire at this trade deadline had to make sense. That was always the case. And I very much understand the frustration of wanting to go out and get something that you believe can be a Band-Aid to fix this 3-5 team. But the thing is, the issues were always going to be fixed internally. Why are the Packers 3-5? Well, because this offseason they lost a ton of people, and it goes way beyond Devontae Adams. They lost MVS. They lost Lucas Patrick. There's several members of the team who left for various reasons. And we tried to replace a lot of them with rookies. Zach Tom instead of Lucas Patrick. Obviously Dobbs and Watson instead of Adams and MVS. And you have this perfect combining of factors to the Green Bay Packers for why they're 3-5. Look at a guy like Devondre Campbell. Is he playing up to his 2021 standard? No, he's not. Is most of the secondary playing up to the 21? Amos and Savage certainly aren't. How about on the offensive side of the ball? Bakhtiari and Jenkins come back from injuries, I would think, has to not be going to the plan that the Packers hoped for. Right? That's obviously a big part of it. How about even A.J. Dillon's regression? He's not running like he did for a lot of last year. Factor in the quarterback, yes, I'm sorry, Aaron Rodgers fanboys, but he has regressed. He's not as good as he was last year. It's not to say he's a bad quarterback right now, but come on. He's not as good as he was in the last 2 years when he was winning MVPs. He's just not. So you have this mass regression across the entire team, right? The way that this team was going to get fixed, I agree. They need a spark. They need something. They need, maybe it's an external force, something to get the good vibes flowing, right? But this team is 3-5 because of its own doing. And it wasn't suddenly going to get magically better because they went out and got Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool, TJ Hockenson, Brandon Cooks, any of the names that were potentially available. Not to mention the fact that all of those guys may give you a little bit of an offensive spark plug, but that does nothing to help whatever is going on with Darnell Savage or Eric Stokes or any of the issues going on in the secondary. So, would it have been nice to see someone come in? Yeah, absolutely. But they didn't. Someone coming in wasn't going to fix everything. And, I got to believe that in the last couple of years, as the team has been on the precipice of being good enough to go to the Super Bowl, those would have been the years to go out and get somebody. The last couple of trade deadlines, like if you're going to give away a second-round pick, if you're going to give away something like that, I mean, don't do it now. Who knows how much longer Aaron Rodgers is going to play? You have gaps on this team. You certainly can't go out and trade for a rental right now or someone you can't afford next year. Whoever you were going to get was going to have multiple years left on a contract that fit within, which is why I loved last week when it was reported that the Packers were most heavily looking at players still on their rookie contracts. Guys that fit, DJ Moore is a perfect example, could fit so easily into the cap this year, and then next year's cap number is like $26 million. They don't have that money. So something was going to have to give. And so what they did was they decided to do nothing. Yeah, for the immediate future, you wanted something new. For the long term, it's hard to fault them. For the short term, kind of hard to fault them there too, because The issues have got to get fixed internally. Chase Claypool isn't going to fix that. Now, in terms of what conversations were they involved in, Tom Silverstein, amongst other beat reporters, put out quite a bit of reporting this morning. Tom Silverstein said that the conversations that he knows the Packers were in on. Tom Silverstein, writer for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, said that they were in on T.J. Hawkinson. They were in on Chase Claypool. They had a conversation about Jerry Jeudy. They were in on Kadarius Toney, which kind of breaks my heart because I love the way Kadarius Toney plays, and I feel like he's everything they always wanted Amari Rodgers to be. Would have been great to see Kadarius Toney, but they were in before he got traded to the Chiefs. And then, very interestingly, Rob Domofsky also said on ESPN this morning that, going through the course of yesterday, they thought they were going to be getting 2 offensive players. One, they thought they had the best offer on the table for Chase Claypool from Pittsburgh. But then there was another deal. That they had a different deal locked up about somebody else from another team. And then at the end of the deadline, the other team decided to pull back and decided not to trade that player. Now, who could that be? Brandon Cooks? Maybe? Maybe someone we've never even heard of in a trade rumor at all. DJ Moore? Who knows? But again, any of those names, and you're looking at the same cap problems that I mentioned earlier, which means they must have had something up their sleeve about redoing a contract, or they just don't care. Who knows? And it's maybe it's not even any of those guys. Maybe it's someone we never heard in the trade rumors at all. But the Packers went through most of yesterday under the impression that they had a good chance to get 2 offensive players coming over. Now, Chase Claypool, specifically, the Chicago Bears gave up their second-round pick, not the Ravens' second-round pick. They gave up theirs to the Pittsburgh Steelers for Chase Claypool. A second-round pick for Chase Claypool is a lot, y'all. I mean, even Bears Twitter was melting down yesterday because they felt like they overpaid. If you go look at Steeler fan accounts, they all say, Chase Claypool, he's good at jump balls, but, he's fine at everything else. A second-round pick for that's a lot. And supposedly, reported from various sources, who knows if this is true or not, but the Packers also offered their second-round pick. And the Steelers chose the Bears' second-round pick because they feel like the Bears are the worst team and it's going to be a better second-round pick. Yeah, you want the Packers to give more than a second-round pick for Chase Claypool? Chase Claypool's never had a 1,000-yard receiving year in his career. I mean, go look at Chase Claypool's stats. I mean, a second-round pick is a lot of draft capital. And to give that up for Chase Claypool, whew, and the more that they would have had to give up, it's a lot. It's a lot. Now, to me, it would have made more sense. Supposedly, Denver was looking compensation for Jerry Jeudy to be something like a second and a mid-round picks, like a second and fourth, second and fifth, something to that effect is what has been rumored. It would have made more sense to me to give a second and fifth for Jerry Jeudy than it would have to give just a second for Chase Claypool, especially because Judy's under contract for longer. But who knows? You never write off a football season until you're eliminated, right? And I know a lot of fans feel like by not making a trade, that's what the Packers just did. They might as well be the Brewers trading away Josh Hader on trade deadline day, right? I get it. I was angry about that one. I was more angry about that one than the Packers. But the problem is the Packers have to fix their internal stuff first. Now, maybe they still go sign OBJ. Maybe there's still something coming. Maybe. We have no idea. I don't know why OBJ would want to come to the Packers anymore, unless the Packers can outbid everyone. But supposedly, per a report yesterday, it's the Bills that have talked about OBJ. They've made contact. The Rams have made contact. OBJ could go back to the Rams just because it's LA and he just won a Super Bowl there. But holy crap, are the Rams equally as broken as the Packers? But obviously the Bills have got to be massively enticing. So there are several teams in on OBJ, and supposedly the Packers are one of them. Could they still get him for a final push in December if he's ready to go? I mean, sure, maybe. But there's just a ton of things that we don't know. And to be so hateful to the team that you love 364 other days of the year, to me, just doesn't make a lot of sense. Take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and say, look, Chase Claypool, TJ Hockenson, none of these guys were going to fix what is truly wrong here. Now, I have two things as to what could be truly wrong with the Green Bay Packers, and they're both very philosophical. They're both very abstract, I guess, if you will. But yesterday on Pat McAfee's show, Aaron Rodgers said that the Buffalo Bill game was the first time this year, first time, week 8, that the Green Bay Packers actually felt ready to go. It's week 8. Now, I don't know as if he meant that as a shot, but that is a shot at Matt LaFleur. Whether he meant it or not. What is the coach's job? Right? To make sure that your guys are ready to go. What is the coach's job? If the players aren't motivating each other, aren't getting themselves up, your job absolutely is to step in, get them motivated, get them fired up. Now, if week 8 is the first time in a given season that your team actually feels ready to go, that is a coaching failure. Now, do not twist my words. I do not want Matt LaFleur fired yet. I'm also a very long-term coaching view kind of guy too, and one bad year does not make firing a coach worth it. Especially if you believe in said coach. But this is straight up malpractice from Matt LaFleur. If you're that unable to get your guys energized, if you can't have them feeling confident, if you can't have them feeling good to go, and maybe it's just Aaron Rodgers. Again, I've spoken out against Aaron Rodgers in the past for being a team spokesman when no one asked him to be. And maybe this is just another example of that. Maybe Rodgers is just projecting, and it's actually the first time all season he actually felt ready to go. In which case, he should shut up and not talk for everybody. But if the Green Bay Packers... Look, we've seen it, right? The first 7 weeks of the year. How much time did we talk about, like, this team is not ready, this team isn't fired up, this team has no energy, this team has no heart, no passion, etc., etc. They got nothing. They just go out there and play football. And even then, horribly uninspired football. That's coaching. It's bad coaching. Item 2 kind of goes right along with the same thing. Look, I mean, complacency, the expectation of winning, taking it for granted. I support, and I know there are some subscribers to this channel who vehemently disagree with me, and that's okay. But Brian Gutekunst, I think, is a good GM. When he first came in, don't forget, he was taking over from the dying McCarthy era, and things were not looking great. He made some free agent moves. He got the team revitalized to the point of Rodgers winning 2 MVPs, the back-to-back NFC championships earlier in his tenure, etc. I think he's a good GM. I think at times he plays the middle. Bill Huber for Sports Illustrated had this great article earlier today that was a total indictment on Brian Gutekunst, saying that the Packers are really good at being good and terrible at being great. It's really hard to disagree with that, and I have more thoughts on that as I digest it more that I'll probably share on Friday. But one thing that I just can't get with, and it's just, to me, they all tie together, right? You talk about complacency, you talk about teams that just have no fire, no will, no passion. They just go out and they expect to win because they're going to execute. And to me, Brian Gutekunst has done his job, and that he has put good rosters on paper. That's the GM's job, is construct a team on paper. Coach's job is to make it work. right? So there was no disagreement to that in August, that the Packers have a good team on paper. So he did it. He did his job. But the part of the job that he really doesn't do a service to with fans or anyone is the fact that he did not show his face today. Matt LaFleur gave his typical press conference and had to answer all of the questions about the roster construction. That's not LaFleur's job. It's Brian Gutekunst's job. Why is it that we don't see Brian? Look, when Ted Thompson retired, we were told, and Brian, by all accounts, was going to be different, that this was going to be refreshing, that he was actually going to talk, that he wasn't going to be Ted Thompson and never should make appearances or anything. But I don't know, we're falling right back. We are falling right back to where we were. Complacency paired with a lack of transparency. I don't expect Brian Gutekunst to go out there the day after the trade deadline and say absolutely nothing. I don't expect him to give away trade secrets either. You know, I don't want to hear from him that, like, oh yeah, I was on the phone with Kansas City's general manager, it was going to be a 4th and a 5th, and then it became a 2nd. Like, no, we don't want those kinds of details, but you should show up. Now, the GM of the Buffalo Bills today gave, I believe it was over 20 minutes of a press conference where he talked about not crazy specifics. He didn't give away trade secrets, but he talked about the process of what it's like to make a trade as a general manager. How do these things come together? How did he view it from the current Buffalo Bills team? And then you have Brian Gutekunst, who's nowhere to be found. You have a fandom that is ripping itself apart and burning to the ground. And I know you're not the steward of the fans. How fans think, whether they argue or anything, that's not on you. I get it. But you should give your fans the courtesy of transparency. And to do that, you have to show up. You want fans to stay loyal? Don't take that season ticket list for granted. And I think the Packers do a lot. A lot. Don't take that list for granted. Show up. Show your face. I don't want to hear from Rob Domofsky that you thought that a deal was on the table and then it got pulled away at the last minute. I want to hear it from you. Leadership isn't that hard. And yet the Green Bay Packers, from the players to the coach, now to the GM, seem to not know how to do it. Thanks for joining me in this episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I will be back Friday with the game preview of Packers versus Lions. Until then, I hope you have an absolutely great day. And as always, go Pack Go.